All right, welcome back to the Hogtown podcast. This is episode 44, our second video episode, and this time with a guest, a friend, architect Craig Race. You are the founder and principal at Lanescape and of Craig Race Architects. So
That's
thanks for
right.
joining us.
And one of three founding members of the Leslieville Residents
That's right.
Association, which is how we first got to know each other.
Yeah, maybe Matt
What's
doesn't
the
know this.
backstory there?
So when I lived in Leslieville, we connected. You had already started the Leslieville Residents Association. I think there were two members at the time.
Yep.
So I was the third
Kale
founding
Fair.
member, and the idea was to do like a YIMBY RA, maybe the only one in the city. And then I moved.
How was that
So
gone?
did I. So did I. Promptly within the first year of creating it, we both left Leslieville.
Has
Yeah.
it been taken over by the NIMBYs now?
No, other Yimbys took it over.
Wow.
Not exactly sure where it's at now, but Blair Scorgi
Yeah,
was
good guy.
part of it for a while. Turo, they're doing a good job.
Oh,
Whatever
Turo's
they're
still
doing
okay,
there.
cool. Yeah, another great architect. And we met, I think, even before then when you were doing Lanescape. So, like,
Yeah.
for people who don't know, you and Lanescape were, I think, instrumental in getting the ball rolling with a lot of this EHON stuff, specifically the laneway suite permissions.
Yeah, that's one of the early feathers in my cap.
Yeah.
Alex and Andrew and I co-founded Lanescape originally just to advocate for a laneway housing policy in Toronto. We saw what was happening in Vancouver, and even Ottawa had a laneway housing policy. We got a one-off house approved that Alex developed
Yep.
to prove that the concept could exist, where you could have a house behind a house on the same services, and the sky wasn't going to fall
Yeah,
if you built
It was
it.
fine. Yeah.
And sort of proved the case, and then started advocating through Mary Margaret McMahon and Anna Bylau
Yeah.
to create an as-of-right bylaw. And it only took us 4 years
Yeah.
of working for free to get it done.
I remember
here we are.
those deputations. Yeah. And then just so that I have it right, because I also don't know exactly what's the difference between Lanescape and Craig Race Architects now. Like, what does what?
Yeah, Lanescape is a design build company
Okay.
that focuses solely on laneway suites and garden suites. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a custom home builder where you come to us to get approvals for and to construct
Typically
a
for
backyard
homeowners
house.
that want to add
Yeah.
something behind their house.
We work for developers too. We have a couple developers where we'll do like multiple properties at the same time,
Interesting.
which I love because we can get really efficient with our design.
Yeah.
But usually it's one-offs for individual homeowners, and there we do have construction as well as architecture.
Got it.
Yeah. And then at Craig Race Architects, you're doing a ton of missing middle stuff. We reconnected. You had a Christmas dinner. Thanks for the invite. And
You'll
that
get the invite next year. Don't,
Yeah,
don't
man.
feel
I
bad.
feel left out.
I told you Matt lives in Georgetown now, but anyway. So
We don't have laneway suites in Georgia.
It's a
Yeah.
hot ticket. There
Or
are only so
barbarians.
many seats, so I have to be careful.
Oh, it's a great dinner. Yeah, it was in the party room at Barbarians. It was.
Oh, yeah,
it was,
I know that room
It's
well.
a good time.
Yeah.
And is that most of your business these days, like smaller multi-unit, kind of missing middle projects?
Yeah, we range from custom homes
Yeah.
to multiplexes, usually with laneway or garden suites behind them, and
Yeah.
then small apartment buildings, like some major street stuff, some avenue stuff.
Okay, cool.
All right. So you're right in the middle of all of these policies that we're going to talk about today.
If anyone's going to find the missing middle, it's going to be
You're,
me.
you're gonna find it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's what we wanted to talk about today was a little bit of an overview of 2025, what happened on the policy side in the city of Toronto, because it does seem like, as much as we like to bitch and complain about how slowly things move, if you just sort of rewind a year,
Yeah.
the city was a very different place. And I think we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. So yeah, that's good starting context.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this has been an incredible year. Like, even my whole career, I've been focusing on adding density to neighborhoods. It started with, secondary suites became as of right, and that blew everyone's mind.
Can
And
you
then-
imagine? Yeah.
Then triplexes, and then, decades passed before we had laneway suites, garden suites, fourplexes. So the acceleration has been occurring.
Yeah.
But this year in particular has been bonkers. Like,
Yeah.
the difference between December of last year and December of this year, it's a completely different housing landscape.
I think that's a good place to start. We were talking just before we started recording that we tend to complain a lot. My guess is I'm also going to complain a lot this episode, but it's within the broader context of nitpicking how good things could be better still.
Oh,
But
tell
we're
me
still
about it.
talking about like good things, and I
Yeah.
think that's like good important context, so that we're just not taking this stuff for granted. So I think because it's the end of the year, today's December 16th, this would be a great summary of everything that happened in 2025. And I think the objective, at least in my mind, for this episode is if we had to let someone know what the current state of these permissions are, it'd be great to send them this episode and they have kind of like a full recap of where we're at on missing middle housing
Yeah.
permissions. Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the beginning of this year, we could build a fourplex on any residential property in Toronto, which was great.
Yeah.
But there were so many policy issues. You couldn't build your laneway suite or your garden suite behind it at the same time, or you had to pay development charges
That's right.
on everything.
So you had to close one permit and then open a second permit for the garden suite.
And the mismatch with CMHC was an obvious miss.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. We had just gotten zoning approvals to hit the CMHC MLI threshold, but the city was like, they had their heads up their own asses
for no
they
reason.
wouldn't allow us to build all 5 units at the same time. So it was a massive hurdle.
Yeah.
We had ways of getting around it, but you had to pay someone like me a whole bunch of money to fix the city's problems.
Yeah.
Well, and completely inefficient from a construction perspective, right?
Totally. We were able to get all 5 units, like permits for all 5 units at the same time, but you had to be very sneaky.
Right.
And
We're running into this a lot. I mean, like, this is a very common theme in our business, is like the need to be sneaky with the way that policies are written, and it's just such a frustrating thing because, like, at the end of the day, you look at your project and you say, "I'm just trying to provide housing units to a neighborhood where everybody's saying
And the
we need housing
sneakiness
units," right?
is always risk, right, to the project.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
you could always get like, if it's like a load bearing requirement for your timeline in your pro forma, and then like the sneakiness, doesn't work.
yeah,
Like it's an unnecessary risk because ultimately the end product is something the city supports through policy. It's just these kind of like process things.
so that was where we started the year.
Yeah.
And now all those problems are gone,
Yeah.
which is incredible. We have a lot of new problems, but they're kind of high quality problems.
Sure.
Like that acceleration I was talking about has really like taken hold this year.
Yeah.
Now we can do 6 units in a multiplex plus a laneway or garden suite in all of Toronto, East York.
Yeah.
We can
When you say Toronto, old city of Toronto,
That's
plus
right.
East York. So like not a and North Scarborough, right?
Yeah, that one ward in North Scarborough.
Yeah, but otherwise, like North York,
Meyer.
Etobicoke, Scarborough's not yet opted into this.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're on a major street, you can do 6 stories. MTSAs allow for 4 stories and 6 stories. They've figured out the development charge inefficiencies. So, all those problems are solved. And now essentially the baseline is 7 units for anywhere in Toronto.
Yeah. Well, when you say they figured out the development charge inefficiencies, so they increased the development charge exemption to 6 units in line with the sixplex permissions. But when we're talking about major streets projects and 4 to 6 story permissions in MTSAs, you're still triggering. Like if you're at 7 units, you're still paying full pop and for every incremental unit.
So that's not quite right.
Okay.
If you're doing a sixplex plus an ADU, that is totally development charge.
I mean, within one building.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're 7 units or more in one building, you're over it.
Yeah.
So we have to be phasing units and that. It sounds like that's going to change later.
Yeah.
But for where we've come this year,
Well,
it's
as
been a
I
good
understand
year.
it, the city was under a development charge review that was supposed to be coming to council in December, was it not?
It was, I believe.
And I
Yeah.
wonder what happened to that, because I think this has been a year in the making. Where like the 6, as I understood it, the 6 unit development charge exemption with the 1 deferral for the garden suite or laneway suite, that was almost like a band-aid to a more permanent discussion around, hey, how do we reform development charges, period.
Right.
Such that maybe, I think the optimistic take was that they would say, hey, the first 6 units are exempt in any building or whatever the case might be. And then all of a sudden you can carry that into a 10-plex or a 15 unit apartment building or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing could happen next year is the first 6 are free in any unit, any building that doesn't have to go to site plan.
Totally.
Or up to 10 units. So there will be more change coming.
Yeah, we've made this point before, but it should be something like how our income tax is calculated. There's an exemption for the first, and then the marginal you pay, because you don't want this benefit cliff where if I'm building 8 units, I have to kill 1 or 2 just to like stay within the exemption, right? Or be sneaky around sequencing permits for the additional 1 or 2. It's this kind of like unnecessary.
Does Olivia Chow listen to this podcast?
We've invited her on about a dozen times and she has not responded. So we
maybe
guess
she'll get this one.
Yeah, we've had our friend and mayoral candidate Brad Bradford on the pod. So and I think he's like pretty up to speed on most of this stuff.
And I'm sure we'll have him back on in this upcoming mayor's race year in front of us.
Yeah, love Brad.
One thing to drill, like my first complaint, since I'm here to complain. So again, like MTSAs, and this was provincial direction that the city upzone neighborhoods land within MTSAs to 4 stories across the board within 200 meters of the subway, 6 stories, which I think is a pretty major upcoming change that most people don't yet recognize has effectively happened. Now we need like the actual details.
Yeah.
I'm hearing from the city that the zoning bylaw amendments and I think probably official plan amendments that are required to meet and remain compliant with that provincial direction is probably coming in like April. So it's going to be not too long. That scale, though, and tell me your thoughts as an architect, is very difficult because 4 stories. At 4 stories, you're just triggering part 3. You're probably triggering where you're beyond like the DC exemption.
Mhm.
Like we have a site now where we could probably do 4 stories and more units, and we're like scaling it down to not trigger part 3
Yep.
and sprinkler system requirements.
Yep.
And then it's the same thing at 6 stories where it's often not enough incremental density to like overcome the incremental Ontario Building Code requirements and development charges.
No, definitely not. It's
Yeah.
a cherry on top.
Yeah.
I think the important feature of the increased stories and MTSAs is that zoning is no longer the issue.
Right.
Now it's life safety. Now it's design.
Right.
It's other things that are still problems.
Right.
But zoning has gotten out of the way. So when we go to committee of adjustment,
one thing on that, and maybe this is what you were going to say in the community adjustment, height is less of an issue, but you still have things like setback requirements and soft landscape requirements and all these other things which are in the zoning bylaw. Yeah. Which are you saying?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to committee for all of our projects right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a time earlier this year where almost everything we did was as of right. Even 6+1s, we would do them as of right. The reason that changed was something else that happened this year where the CRA clarified the HST exemptions on purpose-built rental housing.
Yeah.
Where if you save any portion of an existing property, you do not qualify for any exemptions. I think that's crazy.
It's completely crazy.
But we know it now.
Yeah.
So it's been nice to see that clarity. Like there's reliability around HST exemptions as it applies to this typology.
Yeah.
Now you can make the calculation on, is a sprinkler system worth the extra story?
Yeah.
Generally, it's not increasing the number of units we see on our projects.
Okay.
What it's doing is allowing for like another room with a rooftop terrace that doesn't trigger any new variances. So those upper units in a multiplex, which tend to be your bigger units, they don't have yard space.
Right.
We can put that on the roof now and make them more attractive to families or larger groups of renters.
We've got a project like that. Yeah.
And in fact, you could have 2-level third floor units so that you're not triggering an elevator.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All of our projects, we never have common space, never have elevators. We never sprinkler them.
Yeah.
We can avoid barrier-free units.
Yeah.
That was another change this
Can you
year.
talk to us about that? What is the requirement and how do you avoid it?
So in January this year, the building code changed where it's always been calculated that 15% of units in a building have to be barrier-free.
Right.
We used to be able to round down.
Okay.
So if you had 6 units in a building, that rounded down to 0. It was only when you had 7 units that you were 1.
Right.
That changed in January to round to the nearest whole number.
Okay.
So if you're 4 units or more now, you round up to 1 unit.
Yeah.
You can avoid that with good design.
And sorry, what does barrier-free mean versus accessible or visitable?
The barrier-free provisions basically mean you're going to trigger a soft landscaping variance because you need a ramp to create a barrier-free entrance to one of your units.
Yeah.
You're probably going to lose a bedroom because you need to have turning circles in a bathroom and a bedroom and have wider means of egress through the unit.
Right.
Now, we do lots of units with barrier-free units.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of buildings where that's critically important to create a sustainable Ontario.
Yeah.
But in a fourplex, it's very problematic.
Yeah.
It adds variances. It diminishes your efficiency. It's almost enough to kill a project.
Yeah.
So what you can do is use the provisions of the building code to put a firewall down the middle of the building and split it into 2 back-to-back duplexes or 2 back-to-back triplexes.
Not from zoning's perspective, but from the building code's perspective.
Precisely. Zoning and the building code look at buildings differently.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can be a 6plex that complies with the zoning bylaw, and I can be 2 attached triplexes that complies with the Ontario Building Code.
Yeah. This is why you call an architect who's done a few of these, because these are interesting tricks. Yeah.
And like this has been trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Like this year has seen a lot of change with this. So my contemporaries and I are figuring out how to get around these things.
Yeah.
And it's been through a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You mentioned also here we have this document that we prepared. Tell us about the angular plane removals from laneway suites and garden suites.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
Anyone that tells you need an angular plane on a laneway suite or garden suite doesn't know what they're talking about.
So let me tell you what my understanding is and tell me why it's wrong.
Sure.
So my understanding is that the province basically gave direction to the city that they could no longer require angular planes on second floors of laneway suites or garden suites. And then the city just renamed them sloped roofs. and we still have them. So why is that wrong?
So that's more or less correct.
Yeah.
The Planning Act was amended to eliminate it only on properties of up to 3 units.
Okay.
So there was a while
okay.
where you still had to have them.
Okay.
The city, like zoning staff, started to bring forward bylaw amendments that would have, to your point, changed the name of them to try to get around it.
Yeah.
There was a pretty big outcry from developers and architects and planners saying, like, you're going to get appealed and you're going to lose if you do this. So they got rid of it, and it's not in the bylaw anymore.
So you could build a 2-story garden suite to 6 meters as a box.
6.3 meters, but yes.
6.3 meters as a box.
Part of the reason there's still confusion around this is there have been so many changes this year that the policies have not been brought together. Like if you look at the zoning bylaw published on the city's website, it's missing like 2 amendments. That include things like this. So some of the information that's publicly available is not up to date.
Yeah.
Because they're voting on changes too frequently.
Yeah, there's been.
Well, I think that's letting the city off the hook. They could just update.
No, but like understanding the limitations of the city, it's worth understanding. Yeah.
So until they get consolidated, even city staff aren't totally aware of it. So
like an examiner might flag a variance, and you need to tell them, actually, no.
Yeah, we are keeping track of these things.
Yeah.
Very often we'll get called out on it.
Yeah.
And we have to send them the zoning bylaw amendment that council passed 2 months ago to say, no, it's not a problem anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's interesting to know because we're dealing with this right now. So is there and there's no longer this?
Do I have to send you an invoice for that information? By the way?
Well, everyone in the audience.
We're going to crowdfund the invoice. Everyone watching, we'll put up a QR code.
And there's no like this only applies to like a lot with so many units. This
Limitless.
is across the board.
Yep.
Okay, that's very. I mean, what do you think about that? Because I remember we had this discussion a while back where you were more favorable to angular planes on garden suites.
The laneway suite angular plane was my baby.
Okay.
I made city staff keep it in the bylaws.
So you're
Greg
to blame.
Ewens used to be working at the city and he was writing the bylaw and he wanted to take it out and I asked him to keep it in and he did. Because I felt that with a laneway suite, if you're at your minimum separation from a main house, that's a pretty small backyard.
Sure.
Having an angular plane is not a big deal.
Towards the main building.
If you don't want to build it, you can build your second floor flat on the angular plane. Or if you have a deep yard, you move it beyond the angular plane because it was fixed to the minimum separation and you didn't need it.
Right.
So it was only in the tightest of lot circumstances where it applied.
Right.
That felt appropriate to me.
Sure.
And although I'm definitely
Greg eventually got his way.
I'm definitely leaning towards like being a heartless developer type of person.
Absolutely.
I do have sympathy for our development patterns and the quality of our neighborhoods. That seemed like a good one to me.
Okay.
Garden suites was too much.
Yeah.
To apply that to all 4 sides of a building completely
kills
destroyed the second floor.
Yeah.
So I felt there was something that was a better middle ground for garden suites, but we never had to worry about it because they're all gone.
Yeah, because for what it's worth, for people who haven't walked in one of these garden suites or laneway suites, like it's very noticeable when one of the roofs on the second floor is pitched. And I've seen it in laneway suites where you just have a bedroom where you can't stand up in half the bedroom.
Yeah.
Right? You sort of like tuck your bed under the low part of the roof and you say, hey, get out of the bed on the other side because if you stand up here, you're going to hit your head.
Mm-hmm.
So it ends up sort of creating either less functional bedrooms or kills a bedroom in some cases, right, on tight enough lots. But
yeah, the garden suites especially have been great to revise the designs to get rid of that. We're going from 1 plus den units to 3-bed, 2-bed.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
That's great with that bylaw change.
Yeah, and I know you were just joking, but I think like the charitable interpretation of the heartless developer is more so that we think more about the experience of the tenants in our building than the neighbors to our building, right? Because the heartless developer is ultimately delivering more bedrooms and better units for the people who are actually going to live in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's
I
totally
have a question off the policy, but I'm just sort of curious because you've seen so many of these and you probably even track projects that are not yours. Is there a particular lane in the city or neighborhood where you've seen, like, I'm really interested to sort of fast forward 10 years and see a lane that is becoming more and more laneway suites than like garages.
Right.
Is there like, can you think of an example where there's like a little community getting built on the back lane in Toronto that we can look at as a...
Well, the number one is Croft Street, which is cheating.
Yeah.
It already had
maybe
block houses. So it's like, it's for all intents and purposes a laneway, but it's designated a street.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So it's
there's
like
all
garages
kinds
backing
of-
onto like houses on the other
Is
side.
that the one that got debated in council?
Yeah.
That where they wanted to exclude the permission. There was one street that got excluded from the
You're probably talking about Craven,
Craven.
Parkmount, which backs onto
yeah.
Craven,
Yeah.
which that
where you have garages lining one
Sense
side of
me.
the street and you had houses lining the other side or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Crop Street. Well, that's in the East End.
West End, not far from here.
Oh, interesting. I can't picture it.
So that one's a bit of a cheater though, because it has a lot of postage stamp lots. So there are all kinds of 3-story houses on
Right.
it that are bigger than laneway suites.
Right.
It's been very piecemeal. Like when you look at a map with all the laneway and garden suites on it, it's just peppered across the whole city.
Yeah.
So there aren't too many examples of a laneway that has become majority houses over garages.
I do have this is maybe outside of your specific purview as an architect, but maybe just conversations you've been involved in by talking to the city. Like one thing that's always struck me about laneways is servicing requirements, particularly garbage servicing, like the
Right.
inefficient. So and I know what's his name, our chief planner,
Jason Thorne.
Jason Thorne
Yeah.
has made reference to the idea that the city's starting to look into like smaller size garbage truck services and things like that. But
right.
it still seems like there's a big gap in terms of like actually creating livable spaces in the laneways when they're still like appendages to the front house where, as I understand, you got to like walk your garbage to the street, right? Nobody's going to pick up your garbage in the lane.
Mhm.
And in some cases, you might not even have enough space to walk it to the street. There may not be enough walkways or whatever. Have you heard anything from the city in terms of how they're thinking about long-term servicing of laneways?
No, I have not. And I also haven't heard that it's a problem.
Okay.
Like we've got a lot of boots on the ground in the laneway and garden suite space.
Mhm.
And so far, like you have to get your mail from the front.
Right.
You have to take your garbage to the front. The pizza delivery man comes to the front. Your friends come to the front. Like it's just too intrinsically tied to the main house and the
Yeah.
primary street for it to be a problem. It's really just how you manage and design.
Yeah.
it.
And
guess
actually,
it
you know
just-
what I'm thinking about is more like, and this is actually a different policy, but in mixed use areas with a laneway where you actually don't have like where you've got like a lot line to lot line configuration in the front of the building.
Yeah. Or townhouses.
Or
let's say.
townhouses,
Yeah.
and like you actually can't walk through the lot to the
Mhm.
front, so you almost like you're by default having to like walk around the block to get to the front of the lot. But
Yeah, that's just something that so far has been a significant minority of cases.
right,
And there are provisions to use the laneway for emergency access, so it's kind of well encoded into the policies of the city.
right,
It's just how you manage the property that
Yeah.
becomes something you have to figure out.
And I think what happens is over time, as more and more people live on laneways, the constituency to serve will grow, and then
Mhm.
politically there'll be more pressure to like serve laneways better.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
voters on laneways.
One thing we didn't talk about that also changed this year is this new idea of, well, first of all, like this renaming of multiplexes to houseplexes and this
Yeah.
idea of semi-houseplexes.
Yeah.
So maybe you tell us a little bit about that.
It's pretty simple. You can attach fourplexes now.
Yeah.
It used to be frustrating where if I had 2 properties side by side or 3,
Yeah.
if I wanted to take an otherwise as of right multiplex and attach them with a party wall,
Yeah.
like it's only affecting my property
Yourself.
to
Yeah,
do that,
totally.
not any neighbors. I
Yeah.
had to go to committee for that.
Yeah.
And it not only triggered variances for the form connecting, but also it recategorized the buildings as apartment buildings.
Right.
Yeah,
Which put you in a different section of the bylaw. There was no logic for it.
Yeah.
Like people in City Hall just decided this
Yeah.
was how they were going to do things.
and
It
you
didn't make any
you
sense.
lost the development charge exemption up to 4 units at the time.
That's
6
not true, actually.
Oh, back then you could get around that.
Yeah, because it's still per parcel, like units per parcel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun fact.
Yeah.
You know, the development charge bylaw right now says you're exempt up to a sixplex plus an ADU. The ADU is deferred.
Yeah.
If you're in a zone that only allows fourplexes plus an ADU, that doesn't change the development charge exemption.
Yeah,
So
that's
if you go to committee for a 6+1 in North York, you're
Yeah.
still DC exempt or
Yeah.
deferred.
Yeah.
It's still applied, even though zoning called it an apartment building. You know, we've been able to sort of use those against each other to our advantage.
Right.
And then that said, when the multiplex permissions were increased to 6 units, the semi-houseplex was not also increased to 6
Right.
units. So the semi-houseplex still only applies to 4-unit multiplexes.
We definitely saw with all the changes this year the limit to what councillors could stomach.
Yeah.
Sixplexes were supposed to go citywide.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not upset that they didn't. I think it was sort of a half-ass back out at the last minute.
Sure.
It's better the way it got approved than having it not get approved at all.
Yeah,
right? I think that's
and I'm hoping that one day sixplexes will also apply to major streets and in MTSAs,
Right.
even if you're outside of those wards that have it as of right.
Right.
So we saw councillors start to think, okay, I've been getting votes by supporting housing. I
Yeah.
might start losing them if I
Yeah,
go a
yeah,
little
yeah.
too far.
Well, especially I find that the closer you are to an election, the more the people who are against housing speak out relative to the people who are for housing. And actually, on that note, I don't know if you've been noticing this at committee or various. I don't know if you do any CCMs if you're at that scale of project, but I'm noticing a backlash, particularly in Etobicoke and kind of like inner suburban parts of the city, to some of these permissions, which have existed, to your point, for like a little while, but now people are starting to actually see them get proposed and built.
Right.
Are you noticing this kind of like NIMBY backlash to some of this stuff?
I've been noticing the opposite.
Okay.
I find that there's enough policy framework that I can get staff support for any reasonable application. And by reasonable, I mean we're pretty aggressive with some of our proposals.
Yeah.
I can still point to policies that get staff to support it.
Yeah.
Now, just putting a bunch of connected sixplexes in the middle of an old Etobicoke neighborhood is probably not going to go too well.
Yeah.
But we just got 2 attached fourplexes approved in Etobicoke. We're doing attached sixplexes in Etobicoke.
Yeah.
We got a building that was 4 units turned into 8 that was in Etobicoke. We've got them in North York, Scarborough, like all over the city.
And staff were on board, but like, how was the neighborhood? How was the councillor?
It's always mixed.
Yeah.
Usually councillors stay out of it.
Okay.
Like at the end of the day, they voted for this stuff.
Well, Stephen Holiday didn't.
Good point. Good point. That's why
we've got a project in his fanciful ward, and that's interesting.
And I even find, like, in South Etobicoke as an example, not to pick on anyone, like a councillor who would have been totally fine with this a year ago, now closer to an election, a little bit more dicey, and a little bit less kind of supportive.
Maybe a better way to put it is if there are not large groups of neighbors opposed to something, councillors stay out of it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But actually, it sort of brings me to we haven't quite gone into major streets, and there's been some really good movement on the major streets policy, particularly now that the appeal's been sort of cleared. But we're finding on our project, and we've talked about this project in the past on Kipling, where the politics still very much exist on a major street proposal because you're going to committee, because maybe this is unique to our case because of the ward that we're in and the councillor that we're dealing with, but because you're almost certainly going to get neighborhood opposition because it's a 6-7 story building in some cases. What have you found on your major streets buildings? Are you finding that they're quote unquote the zoning is approved, or are you finding that you're actually running into more surprises than you'd expect?
I am hopefully going to be starting my first major street project soon.
Okay.
I've had a lot of clients hire us to do a major street building, and I'll study it and show them what that will yield. And then I'll say, here's what happens if we take this lot and sever it into 2 or 3, and we build 2 or 3 attached sixplexes with 2 or 3 garden suites in the backyard. Where you're not paying development charges. It's a way easier minor variance application. No
Simpler
site
path,
plan, no elevators, no common space, no sprinklers. And you get like the same amount of net leasable area out of doing multiplexes as you do out of doing a 6-story building.
Yeah.
They don't really work unless you get a large amount of frontage.
Yeah.
And you go to committee for all kinds of stuff. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Which is where we're at. We have large frontage, 88 feet, and we still have to go to committee for a bunch of stuff. But I think you make a very good point, because our project in the Glencairn neighborhood could support a ZBA for 6 stories, I think comfortably, if not taller, mid-rise, and we're going with keeping the parcel separate, and we're building separate multiplexes, because, and I think again, like, to balance this out, the multiplex stuff is all good, but it's still not good that incentive exists to downgrade something that is permitted.
Right.
That means that like there's some threshold that's like too severe, and I think that those thresholds exist in the building code, development charges, and zoning,
and just specifically on the major streets project that we have. I mean, like, one thing that we're now experiencing is that although you might have zoning approvals or might require some minor variances, you still need site plan approval. So you still need to negotiate with the city, and they're these are new to the city, right? So they don't exactly know how to react to the types of site plans that we're putting forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you end up still with this risk that the city's going to oppose you at your committee hearing, even though your committee variances might seem minor in nature.
Yeah.
If you don't have city staff on board because they're unfamiliar or unwilling to go out on a limb, or you have a councillor who's sort of making it political. So it does feel like major streets buildings are permitted. in theory, in practice, you're still going to run into a bunch of obstacles in the process of getting them approved.
The bylaws are so frustrating too. Like 2.5 meters side yard setbacks. Are you kidding me? Like
even like I've talked about this before, but 19-meter total height, often through site plan, the city will ask for 4.5-meter ground floor because they want the potential for future retail. And then if you add 3-meter floors above that, you're already at 19.5. So that's a variance just to like match what they want and have like 9-foot clear ceilings, which is pretty default these days. So it's like that 19 meters could have been 20, could have been 21, and it would have been fine. Those side yard setbacks in the old city of Toronto, they're 1.8. So why do they have to be different in the rest of the city? And then like front yard setbacks are always frustrating because they're not often like we could stomach them in terms of like our lots are deep enough, but I think they just reinforce this suburban streetscape that like in a better world these permissions would be allowing us to urbanize more along these major streets.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back on 2025, I view major streets as a nice to have.
Yeah.
Like it moves the ball.
Yep.
It's one of those things that zoning is becoming less and less of the issue. It's all these other things we're talking about. It's the puzzle of development. Like really, you have to be a charismatic person who knows how to use Excel and like operate in all these overlapping policies to make money in this industry.
Yeah.
That's what it should be about. It shouldn't be about someone trying to stop you. It should be about optimizing for the
Figuring
circumstance.
It out. Totally.
Yeah, I do find that like major streets to me is sort of you're landing in one of two buckets, and there's some exceptions to this because there's obviously people moving forward with major streets projects, including us, but very likely you're going to land in a bucket where you're either you have major streets permissions available to you, but you're also maybe sitting on an expanded avenue where you could go for a ZBA and you could get more density than the major street permissions.
Right.
And so I think a lot of projects are now saying, hey, I could go through this rigmarole of getting my major streets permission site plan approval, or I could go through a zoning bylaw amendment, get 8 stories instead of 6, or 9 or 10 stories instead of 6. Or in the reverse is what you're saying. You're saying major streets projects were actually the simpler, faster construction of a series of multiplexes actually looks better. So you're either seeing people want to go bigger or go smaller, but the built form of a major streets building is still sort of like not perfectly fitting all the criteria that a developer is looking for, at least in a lot of the cases that we're seeing, right? So
it's true.
Yeah. This is why I think the MTSA 4 to 6 story permissions will actually just end up with a lot more of these like 3-story multiplexes. As one of the original people behind the Laneway Suite push, what is your interpretation? And this is like really a planning question, but it sounds like you're as much a planner as you are an architect, effectively.
By necessity.
Major streets permissions were for 6-story buildings along major streets on neighborhoods designated lands. The Laneway Suite and Garden Suite policies apply to neighborhoods designated lands. Do they apply to the rear of major street 6-story apartment buildings?
If you're in an MCR or CR zone, the quick answer is no.
Not CR zone. If you're like RD, whatever, neighborhoods designated land, R zone.
Yeah, those still apply.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, we're having this fight with the city where, just as a funny anecdote, Greg Ewens is our private planner, and he was at the city when a lot of these policies were drafted.
Yep.
And the city was telling him that's not the intent of the policy, and he's like, well, I could tell you with some authority that was the intent of the policy because I wrote it.
Well, yeah, because I think what was never fully factored in is the idea of garden suites sitting behind major streets buildings,
right?
And in a certain context, you can envision putting a 6-story building on the front of the lot and a garden suite at the back of the lot.
And I think what's cool about that potential is, I don't know if you've seen this discourse around like European style courtyard blocks where you have like courtyards and they're fully enclosed so the kids could go play in the backyard and they can't like escape to the street, and you could have eyes on them from the windows. You effectively create, over time as you develop major streets with, let's say, 6-story apartment buildings along the major street, 2-story garden suites or laneway suites at the rear, you're creating this courtyard in between that I actually think is pretty cool urbanism.
Yeah.
We've got the same problem on one of our projects, which Greg is working on with me.
Okay.
And the solution for us, which the city seems thrilled with, is to just connect the 2 buildings with a little nonsensical 3-foot corridor for no reason. And then suddenly it's acceptable. Like,
just to break up your courtyard to make it less fun.
It's one of those things that's just you got to play ball, and that's one.
You got to play ball, and I think these things, we're always impatient because we have active projects that are on a clock.
Yeah,
these things will improve over time necessarily. Like, we know there's already a lot of hesitation in approving variances to major streets policy, in part because the major streets policy is so new. I don't think that should matter. If you need the variance, you need the variance, whether the policy is new or not. But I think, like, as the policy becomes more entrenched and accepted, variances get a little bit easier, and this should continue to improve over time.
And that's why I'm so thankful about what's happened this year.
Totally.
The missing middle has moved from we couldn't do more than 4 units, to now we're talking about, you can do 6+1s times 3
Yeah.
very easily. So we've moved forward on what our acceptable minimum is.
Yeah.
Of course, there's still a missing middle.
Yeah.
And like, there's still a ceiling where, okay, I've done this. Now I need to jump to high rise
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
nothing in between those that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think I think it's the right way to frame it. Like, I think of that, and not to say there aren't exceptions to this, but I think of that as like this threshold where you kick into 4 stories and probably up to 6, maybe even 7 stories, where there's just a difficulty making the economics work in that scale because you're triggering different building or code requirements. You're taking on development charges. You're taking on like common amenity space requirements. All these things that kick in, right? In some cases, type G garbage loading, and then you're going to say, well, I may as well just build a 10-story building or a 3-story building, but building 6 is really challenging, or building 5 is really challenging, right?
Absolutely.
So,
We talked a lot about the policy updates. Let's get into regulatory updates. You mentioned the barrier-free stuff, which is new as of January of this year, and kind of like some potential ways. The way to get around it is to call you, right, and hire you as the architect.
That's the solution to every problem.
There you go.
can I? Sorry, I did want to ask one more thing on the zoning side, because I know we didn't put it on the list, and I don't know that you've run into this because so new, but what are your thoughts on retail in neighborhoods? Are you seeing this coming up on future projects?
Yeah.
Do you have clients that are interested in this?
So far, it's just pet projects.
Okay.
People who want to put a cafe in a laneway house or something like that. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
It speaks to the vibrancy of our neighborhoods,
Totally.
and it builds on the EHON initiatives that have helped us make all the change we've made this year.
Yeah.
So I think it's got a long way to go. I don't know who's
getting the current version of the approvals actually moves the needle in terms of people building these things.
No.
So we'll need a couple of iterations on the policy itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a clear directive of the EHON policies.
Yeah.
I don't think. The wisdom of Anna Bailau and Mary Margaret and all the counselors that, really pulled the sails up for the EHON initiatives has gotten us to where we are today. That was all about cracking open neighborhoods and adding housing where it wasn't before. Someone else is going to have to pick up the mantle on neighborhood retail and on finding the gap between 3 stories and 30 stories. Like, these are all things that I think we'll hopefully see continue to evolve. Right now, there's no immediate focus on it.
Yeah.
Maybe if Brad Bradford becomes mayor, there will be.
Yeah. Vote for Brad. Regulatory updates. Okay, so the barrier-free units we talked about, non-combustible steel stud requirements have increased. So
this was crazy.
Yeah.
Did you guys have any exposure to this?
So our exposure is that we've recently we built a 4-story 6-unit walk-up par 3 building, and we needed non-combustible like CFS sidewalls because of our proximity to the lot lines.
So this affected Part 9 multiplexes this year.
Okay,
where this
basically the same thing now scales down to Part 9.
So my whole career, multiplexes had to have steel stud walls once you had 3 units stacked. But we would platform frame. So you would build a steel wall, your wood floor would rest on top of that, and then the next steel wall would rest on top of that. That's the way we've been building non-combustible construction.
So you have a gap in the steel non-combustible wall assembly because you have your joist hitting.
And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's the way
how you did it.
Always have been done. The theory was that your fire separation on the underside of your ceiling protected that pocket.
It's 2 contained compartments.
It was reasonable. This summer, the city reorganized the building department. It used to just be basically houses and large buildings. They split it into houses, small buildings, and large buildings. The small buildings team started looking very closely at multiplexes, and they decided that they didn't like that assembly with how framing worked in multiplexes.
Right.
And they revoked permits for dozens of multiplexes across Toronto.
Wow.
So we had to, mid-construction, we had fully framed projects, we had to seek revisions to permit to insert steel framing to make it continuously non-combustible all the way up, which we would have been happy to do if anyone had insisted on that from the start.
Yeah.
But they pulled the rug out from under us on a lot of projects. And that has turned into something that has been happening with increasing frequency. You really have to be conscious of the building code and how you're designing these projects, because the city is not afraid to just stop your work and make you fix things, even if you got a rightfully issued permit.
And just to confirm, does a 3-story house require a non-combustible sidewall assembly?
No, it's whenever you have stacked units.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a little crazy that they would be so rigid. We could talk about the actual policy change, but so rigid that they're rug pulling ongoing projects, whereas, the house next door might be the same scale and have no seal at all, and that's fine. Right.
I mean, I appreciate the concept of what the building code's trying to do.
Yeah.
But it is scary that in this regulatory environment, like the city will just change their mind
The
on code
transition should be
interpretations.
smoother in these rules.
That's something we're starting to see the province
Yeah.
put eyes on.
Yeah.
A lot of municipalities are struggling with code interpretations, especially with these new and emerging dense infill projects.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping 2026 will become a year of clarity for that.
Yeah.
2025 was a year of kind of discovering the problems with the building code as it relates to everything in that typology.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll start to see fixes and clarity on it so those kinds of things don't happen.
Well, yeah, ultimately what you need is you need certainty, right? So
Exactly.
people can't go into projects worried that their permit's going to get pulled halfway through construction, right? So
And just to confirm, this new treatment, if you're starting kind of from your drawings with this in mind, it's fine.
Absolutely. We're essentially balloon framing.
Yeah.
So your steel studs just are continuous. You attach your floor structure, which can still be wood, to the face of the steel, and it's all good.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
So it's a temporary problem for projects that started before this clarity and now are
There will be something new that comes up this year.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of a gray zone in the building code.
And worth noting that I'm sure you've got your eyes on this, but the province has announced a section by section review of the Ontario Building Code, and this is probably a good time if you don't have any issue with this code requirement. Maybe there are some others, but like to start flagging things that are really problematic at this scale, because the building code wasn't really written with this scale in mind, right? It was like
absolutely
low-rise subdivisions and high-rise buildings and things that like add a lot of cost at this scale.
Well, it's kind of like how the city split the building department into houses, small buildings, large buildings. The code has a missing middle. It's got a house code in part 9 and it's got a high-rise code in part 3. But there are a lot of projects that skip back and forth between them.
Yeah. I was talking to someone at the ministry who was basically asking, like, they have this general preference for like a smaller building code, conservative, deregulate, liberalize, whatever. But is it okay to make the building code?
Conservatives want to liberalize?
Well, again, we have many complaints about this specific, but this person is like an ideological kind of like free market guy. So we want to shrink the building code, but maybe it makes sense to actually lengthen it to the extent that we add a set apart between part 9 and part 3 that is not as much of a jump. And to me, that makes like a ton of sense.
There's something to that.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with any projects that have gone through alternative solution applications or are currently? Yeah. And what's your experience been on that with the city? Have you gotten any approved?
Yes. The big one for us, we don't often do it.
Right.
One project, we got a bunch of units approved with interior daylighting.
Okay.
So we had bedrooms that were in the middle of a multiplex that didn't have windows.
Yeah.
We could create a window to the living space that they were able to accept. That was pretty easy.
Yeah.
A few things like that are just kind of run of the mill. Extended emergency access to laneway suites and garden suites.
Yeah.
Nothing serious so far.
You haven't dealt with single egress alternative solutions?
Not yet. We've got one project we're looking at it on.
It seems to me like a big black box of like uncertain timelines, which makes it scary.
Yeah.
Because you go in not knowing it's going to be 2 months or a year of just sitting and waiting, right? So,
and uncertain solutions.
Yeah.
It sounds like from the consultants I've talked to, the city is saying like, oh, well, put an extra layer of drywall here and increase your extraction and exhaust there and do this and that. And it's like, oh, why should I do that?
That is not worth doing.
You just feel like
Yeah,
it.
totally.
Yeah.
And you're going to run into that where with like single stairs is especially like a hot emerging issue. You're just going to have to figure it out and spend a lot of time and money on a project that's not going to do much to your project.
Yeah, I think ultimately we looked at this extremely closely, and ultimately we just need the LBC change. Anything short of that is not going to be.
Yeah, I mean the cost of sitting and waiting is often more expensive than the value you accrue by reducing one stairwell in the building.
Even if it because you now have this one precedent, Pamela Blaze got her project approved. The alternative measures are like
very
excessive.
Yeah, they're
so it's like you're not actually saving much. I heard that this I might bungle because I don't know the specific thing. I was talking to Conrad Specker, who I'm sure you know. He was telling me there was something about like the way in which you service a garden suite or a laneway suite. Like the services can't run like through a bulkhead through the main building. They have to go around. Do you know anything about and it's like a little complicated?
The current issue is that once you have 3 units or more in a building, you're in a section of the building code that prevents you from running services underneath another unit.
Okay. Yeah,
so
that's what it was.
you can run services through any units you're stacked above or below.
Yeah.
You can't run services under a unit you're beside.
Right.
Effectively.
Right.
So when we split our multiplexes to have 2 units or 3 units in the front and 2 or 3 in the back ones can't run their services under the front ones, and the laneway suite can't run their services under either.
Right.
So there are ways around that. So far, we haven't had to get alternative solutions for those. We just kind of talk the city into it.
Yeah.
But that's something that like would be great if there was a code update.
Yeah,
to
that sounds
just
like
allow
something that they could clean up. And it doesn't sound like there's any like safety reason for this. It's just kind of like a weird thing.
Well, and
that they could probably
particularly with
clean up.
these sixplex configurations, at least the way we're looking at them is often they just mean front units and back units on every floor. So you end
Yeah.
up with this like front and rear configuration in the main structure, right? So
Yeah. And
Yeah.
all of this comes from like high rise and mid rise.
Yeah.
You know, you can't have a whole bunch of services running through another
Yeah.
unit because if the pipe bursts,
Yeah.
that person's
That's right.
completely underwater.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a little different when it's
For
like
multiplex.
a couple toilets on the other
That's
side
right.
of the wall.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. Okay, so council direction to refuse removal of trees for garden suites and multiplexes soon to get worse.
I mean, that was a step backwards we took this year.
Yeah.
I've been really impressed with council like putting their weight behind a lot of this missing middle housing policy change.
Yeah.
This year, the city council sent direction to urban forestry to refuse the removal of trees for garden suites and multiplexes. Like that's crazy.
as a standard of as a policy.
So even if your
For bylaw
project
protected,
is
like-
fully
yeah.
as of right,
Yeah.
they have been directed to refuse removal. So I
Which is
have
a total poison pill.
couple instances where I'll just spend a weekend having my team work up an as of right permit for a 2-room house on a site. I will get a permit for it that's completely inside a tree protection zone, remove the tree, close that permit, and then apply for a multiplex and a laneway suite and not have problems. But if you don't go through that rigmarole,
Yeah.
your whole project is done.
Yeah, that's wild.
So it's
Well, we know a guy who will poison trees for you. No.
yeah. So
That's the incentive,
that's what's frustrating.
which is really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
There-
crazy that you create a system that incentivizes people to skirt the rules on these things.
and it's getting worse. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah, of course.
saw a policy go to housing and planning a couple weeks ago that was going to create like a more protected
Yeah.
size of tree when
Yeah.
you're 60 or over. You know, it's harder and harder.
Yeah.
And they were going to bring down the minimum size to protect a tree.
Yeah.
Like this is going to come back next year and it's going to be problematic. All it's indicating is that you need to poison your trees and illegally cut them down.
Yeah.
Because like all these policies are so complicated.
Yeah.
Urban forestry can't figure them out when you're trying to get a rightfully applied
Yeah.
permit approved. They can't enforce the rules. No
Yeah.
one's getting caught for this.
Yeah.
It's just it's ridiculous. It's NIMBYism, and it's going to cause problems if it
And
keeps
it's
getting
worth
worse.
it's worth noting that there's currently a 3-to-1 tree replacement requirement. So like we're not losing the total number of trees. Every time a developer cuts down a tree lawfully, they increase the number of trees because they have to replace these trees.
Number
So
of trees in Toronto has been increasing
right.
every year of
so
our
like
lives.
this is not actually about trees. This is actually about poison pilling multiplex permissions.
Yeah, giving
Yeah.
neighbors another thing to get upset about.
At that same council or planning and housing committee meeting where this came up, there was also another, I don't know if you saw this, a member's motion from Councillor Myers, and I know it was worked on by his staff, Darnell Harris, who's really great on this stuff, to allow for 25% of your required soft landscaping area be hard permeable surfaces.
Mhm.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
If you have like you run into this kind of like issue often.
Sure. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I really like Councillor Myers and his team.
Yeah.
Like, they are the shining beacon we need
Totally.
to follow.
Yeah.
That one is kind of like a nothing burger for me.
Yeah.
Like it's what frustrates me about it is, half your yard has to be landscaping, half of that has to be soft landscaping, 25% of that can be it's
Yeah.
like, why do we have a
So many.
rushing
Too
nesting
prescription, yeah.
doll of
Yeah,
totally.
complication? Like take your landscaping requirement to a reasonable percentage
Yeah,
that
that would
every
be even
house in
better.
Toronto already is.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Just simplify it. Like,
Yeah. Well,
So-
another thing that came up, this is not really multiplex related, but pools will no longer be considered soft landscaping, which means no more as of right pools.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And pools obviously like retain water because they're pools. The way in which this kind of comes up for us is as soon as you trigger small apartment building, you trigger a 1.5 meter side yard soft landscaping strip requirement.
Yeah.
And if you want to do side access for more efficient access to, like, let's say scissor stairs, you need to go within that 1.5. So if you were able to do permeable pavers for that distance, which again, in the name, they are permeable, that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Great. I hope
Yeah.
it goes through. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
I think you're right. I mean,
progress.
it's adding sort of layers of complexity versus reducing. Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, I made this point. We have again this project where we're straddling the citywide zoning bylaw and North York bylaw, like this kind of like one of these pockets that was not updated when
Yeah.
the city was amalgamated. Identical buildings on each. The new bylaw is more permissive on things like height and depth and you can all this good stuff we're talking about, and yet we have twice as many variances under the new bylaw versus the old bylaw because you have all these additional requirements that nobody even cared or thought about, under the old bylaw.
Sure.
So it's getting more permissive in some ways, but also more prescriptive. So you just have to like tweak a lot more. So that's an interesting one. We talked about HST exemptions excluding renovations. And just to make this really clear for the audience, so the federal government started this process and they were matched by the provincial government to rebate apartment buildings from having to pay HST. The old system is you'd build an apartment building, you would self-assess its value, and you would pay HST on that. Now there's a rebate. But the way in which the CRA is interpreting this is if you maintain any part of the old building that you demolished or are renovating, including one brick, as the extreme example, the rebate no longer applies. So again, if you're thinking about like the mismatch between policy intent, including what was actually voted on by Parliament, and how the regulators and bureaucrats are implementing it, this seems like a big one that has to be fixed.
Yeah, it's also important the way you described it.
Yeah.
A lot of people who are like newer to development, which missing middle policies allow you to be, think, oh, I don't have to pay the HST on my hardware bill.
Yeah.
It's not that simple. Like you trigger an HST event when you finish a project and you have to assess value creation and pay HST on that amount.
Yeah.
So it's hundreds of thousands of dollars most projects trigger, if not millions in larger projects. And it was like the CRA said, new buildings are exempt. And the question was, well, what does that mean if I save a wall? Or in the case
foundation,
when you're in Toronto, if you save 50% of your walls, those become lawfully existing setbacks, and we can avoid committee of adjustment.
Yeah.
Well, now you would have to pay a ton of HST if you do that. So that's why this year we've gone from most of our projects being as of right to every single project needing minor variances.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth stating, like, we're dealing with this now in one of our projects, which is, in one of these interpretive gray areas as to whether it was a renovation or a new build. I think I know how the CRA will interpret it, but it's worth noting that there are some ongoing challenges to the CRA's interpretation on this policy, because there is a way to appeal a CRA interpretation if you think that the intent of the policy was different than the interpretation of the CRA in administering it. So I think it's possible that these things will change, and it's also worth clarifying because we've had a lot of people reach out. In fact, we read an event a couple of weeks back, or a month ago maybe, that Foremost hosted, where you had people asking these HST questions, and Rami, whose last name I'm forgetting, the HST specialist.
Yeah, he's great.
Who's great on this stuff. So one thing worth clarifying is this only applies to the renovation of pre-existing residential buildings. If you are changing use, obviously not in the world of multiplexes, but we've got a project where changing use from a non-residential building into a residential building, the HST rebate still applies. There seems to be some gray area around, what if it was a mixed use building before the conversion to residential. But to Chris's point, the intent of the federal policy was to create more housing units. And now the interpretation is saying, well, we like these new housing units, but we don't like these ones. And people are being surprised by multi-$100,000 bills at the end of their project.
One thing that is true across all these categories, zoning, building code, regulation, tax treatment, is that in the world of suburban subdivisions and high-rise buildings, each firm is large enough and could capture enough value on any one project that they could afford the lobbying costs that it takes to kind of like address these things. Whereas like no one missing middle developer will pay for the challenge of the CRA's interpretation. You kind of need to crowdfund it. And I think for that reason, it's getting the short thrift on a lot of these policy questions because there is no build for missing middle, and no one missing middle developer could hire like, Tories or Deloitte or whatever to challenge the CRA.
Sure.
So I think and to the extent that the point, at least one of the points of these policies is to make development more accessible to like what we call citizen developers. Like that is something that should be addressed. Like there's so much policy by lobbying that happens. That's kind of like the system. It doesn't work if you want to enable smaller scale people who can't afford that.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, worth noting that also these renos are much more likely to apply at very small scale projects versus like a high rise is very unlikely to be a renovation. Right.
That's right.
You might have an old heritage facade where you kept a brick, but
that said, maybe as like a fun project, I think Matt was looking into this. Maybe we'll see what like a scope of a CRA interpretation challenge looks like, and we'll put it out to the audience if we could maybe. Who
wants to be involved in a class action lawsuit against?
This is to your point, hundreds of thousands of dollars implication at the smaller scale for like missing this interpretive rule.
And particularly in places like Toronto, where you're
Yeah.
dealing with tight infill lots, where the placement of your wall is so critical.
Yeah.
And if you have to tear that wall down, then the zoning impact of that, and the final leasable area in your building.
Even we have a site where there's a building at a 0 lot line. We're going to get approval for a new construction. It's physically impossible to shore this site. Like, we have to keep the old wall and just support it
as
while
you're
we
shoring
excavate
effectively, yeah.
and then build a new wall inside of it. So we're going to lose space because we can't use what's there.
Yeah.
Just because we have to build a new wall in front of a perfectly good old wall.
Yeah.
To your point about the puzzle of development, right? You're dealing with federal tax policy on top of everything else.
At least we know.
Yeah, exactly.
At least we know. Terrion. So we often think about this scale for rental because that's most of what we've seen. But we had Ben Singer on, who's been talking a lot about and working with clients on condo minimizing at this scale.
Yep.
So tell us about the regulatory updates on the Terrion home warranty side of
with
things.
Multiplexes and major streets, it seems to only affect if you're selling.
Yeah.
Where we've seen a big issue with Terrion this year is as it applies to laneway suites and garden suites.
Okay.
So Terrion decided this year that a laneway house and a garden house, even if you're building it behind a multiplex, an existing home, in any case, it's a contract built home. And you have to register for the Terrion home warranty program. This is true if you're not selling it. This is true if you're living in it yourself.
This is new?
This is true if you're renting it. Yeah, this happened this year.
Wow.
So what's interesting is Terrion's registration rate for like subdivision homes is like 99%.
Yeah.
Like, it's very clear. Everyone does it. When you're selling it, you can justify the economics and it makes sense.
Yeah.
With laneway suites and garden suites, my company got called out by the HCRA and Terrion for this. So we got registered with Terrion. The securities they require are insane. Like, we first got assessed at $50,000 per unit that I had to give to Terrion for 2 years for them to slowly give it back to me.
As like a letter of credit or escrow or something? Like, will they accept bonding as a security?
Possibly, certainly an LC. Basically, we have to put cash somewhere for the full amount.
Wild.
Which is insane.
Yeah, that's wild.
Now, we negotiated with them and we got it dealt with. But in our discussions with them, we pulled the permit history for all the laneway suites and garden suites in Toronto, which at the time was about 1,100 units. Only about 100 of them had been registered with Terrion. So they have about a 10% enrollment rate in something that they themselves claim is a requirement by law.
What's the rationale for them stepping into this space?
I wish I could answer that.
Because if like, my understanding, and I might bungle this, but my understanding of the development charge deferral as it relates to laneway suites and garden suites is specifically to avoid the condominiumization of those suites, right? The city's trying to insist that you don't ultimately sell that unit. And my understanding of Terrion is that it only applies in the context of product that is built for sale. So are these things not contradictory?
I wish the world was so simple.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So this is the funny thing. Like, the provincial law does not say laneway suites and garden suites have to be enrolled in Terrion. I read it to say they don't have to be because you're not selling them.
Yeah.
Right.
Terrion decided this in their own bulletin.
Yeah.
So they've come up with this, and the province isn't interested in changing it. Terrion isn't interested in doing anything different. My problem is that my company has been penalized significantly for trying to follow the rules. So early next year, we're going to start pulling every address in Toronto that has a laneway or garden suite behind it.
Yeah.
And we're going to give it to the HCRA and see if they enforce it.
Yeah.
I guarantee you they won't.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping is that
it triggers a review of the policy.
Yeah, the policy changes.
The rationale behind these things.
But any developers building a laneway suite or garden suite right now have to be careful. It could be behind an apartment building or a multiplex, and you technically have to enroll it in Terrion. So just be ready to deal with that if you've got a lot under.
But only if we're in the unlucky 10% that you are in.
Well, I was in the 90%. Now I'm in the 10%.
I do have a question. Maybe this is more of a Ben Singer question, but as I'm thinking about these development charge deferrals, and have you been involved in a lot of condo multiplexes?
Only a few.
Only a few. Now, am I allowed in that context to include the garden suite or laneway suite in the sold condo?
Yeah.
Yes.
You just can't sever.
So, but this development charge deferral that the city applies to those units, I thought was with the intent to not allow those to be sold off.
Understanding the difference between exemption and deferral is the critical piece here.
Right.
So you are exempt on the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth unit.
Yeah.
For any development in the residential zone.
Yeah.
So if you build a 5-plex and a garden suite, all units are exempt. You
Right.
don't have to defer
Right.
your garden
It's a
suite
6+1.
DC. Yeah, it's only
Yeah.
when you're at 6 and you have to have a deferral registered on the
Got it.
ADU. That's when it would be nullified by
Okay.
A funny thing about these like policies that fairly recently started like including tenure as a consideration, because this never was the case,
Hmm.
is that these all came in at a time when the industry was pretty much only building condo, and we're like, remember there was all this discussion we should have rental only zoning and stuff like that. Now the industry is only building rental, and like people are saying we need more ownership housing, and it's just like policy just should not get into the question of tenure, to my mind, because you can never time it precisely. You don't know where the market's going to go. It seems a little bit crazy.
I mean, year in review,
Yeah.
I love that we're having these problems.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Like before this
perspective.
year, we couldn't do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like no one was condoing
Yeah.
anything other than
Yeah.
Evan Saskin.
Yeah, Evan
It's
Saskin.
amazing.
I'd love to see more.
We'll move to Halifax. We lost him. Yeah.
Well, he's still building in Toronto, though. He clarified that. He's
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, he's still active here.
But I'd love to see more of that scale. I mean, I know Ben Singer's on a personal evangelical mission to get more people
It's
building
gonna happen.
small scale condo. It's a very cool product category.
Well, just one thing on that note, again, sorry to be the complainer, but like what would be really great, since we have these 4 6-unit multiplex permissions with a defined box height, depth, sidebacks, and so on, with the potential to condominiumize them, it'd be great to see more of these built and designed as townhouses. But
Yeah.
of course, the way in which you define a multiplex is like one part of a unit needs to be beneath the other part of a unit. I don't know why. I don't know what additional externality having them side by side introduces
Yeah.
to neighbors. But to like simplify it to basically extend these permissions to 4 to 6 unit townhouses would be fantastic.
And I hate that rule
Yeah.
that part of a unit has to be above
Yeah.
another unit. It's so easy to fix.
You just have like a closet under like
Yeah.
the main floor of another. Yeah.
Not like you just jog a wall
Yeah,
like
yeah,
6
yeah.
inches and it's
There's only one needs to be under another one, or they
Yes.
all have to be.
just
Yeah, so you could
one.
have like 4 townhouses. The basement of one of them has a closet poking under the ground floor of the second one, and then you're a multiplex.
Same with the bedroom limit.
Right.
You're only allowed 12 bedrooms.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
just relabel one
Yeah.
dining room
Yeah.
and your problem solved. Like there's some stuff like that I think had to be in the policies because
That's how it got passed.
constituents
Sure.
and counselors that don't like these things. So they think they're protecting
Yeah.
their interests. If we come up with simple ways around them, it's
Yeah.
not really a problem.
And actually, what this does is it enables that future change of eliminating that requirement to be like a nothing burger,
yeah,
right?
look how we've already been
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Let's just get rid of it.
I think like where this ultimately goes, or at least where I hope it ultimately goes, is we have this multiplex bylaw, we have the semi-houseplex, but only for 4 units. Eventually, it should just be consolidated in an updating R zone, right? With all these permissions just baked into the R zone, and then we don't need RD, we don't need RT, RM, everything else. Yeah,
That'd be nice.
that'd be nice.
Question for you, maybe a little bit off topic from the list, but have you run into any issues as it relates to severances as part of a development application? Do you see any policy changes on the horizon related to like streamlining and clarifying severance rules in the city?
Not really. I mean, severances have always been more of an art than a science
Yeah.
anyway. Like generally I tell my clients, if I can create lots that are about the same frontage and about the same lot area as the other properties around, we're going to get it approved.
Yeah.
I love severances because it doubles.
But that assumes, right? Yes, that's my understanding of it as well. But that assumes that neighborhoods with 60-foot lots are never going to change, right? Because like to be the first to introduce that would be met with a lot of opposition.
Because you wouldn't be reinforcing the pattern. You'd be going out of pattern.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think there's logic to that. Like if you're in a neighborhood that has all 60-foot lots,
Yeah.
all the houses are probably 50 feet wide.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
you've got a neighborhood with 60-foot lots and a bunch of 20-foot houses with empty halves sitting on them.
Yeah.
Well, their argument would be like, there was a time when every lot in Toronto was like an acre, right? And then like through the process of time, you subdivide.
Fair enough.
And now like downtown, we have 20-foot wide lots.
Yeah.
Whereas we've kind of like halted that process in Etobicoke and Scarborough through zoning.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we still do severances all the time and
Yeah.
we're having success with them, but you have to have a solid planning logic
Yeah,
behind it,
yeah.
just like anything else.
Did you see this case on Glencairn east of Allen Road? So the developer applied for a severance. I think it was a 50-foot lot down to 225s, pretty close to like the pattern of the street. I think the pattern of the street was like 33 or something.
Okay.
Lost at committee, went to TLAB, won at TLAB, and now the city is appealing the TLAB decision at some district court, which I've never seen before.
Wow.
So that was
But
interesting.
they're trying to eliminate a precedent from
Yeah.
happening. Right?
And to answer your question, Matt, one thing I hate to like put hope in this provincial government, but the province has announced that they're reviewing minimum lot sizes and basically getting rid of minimum lot sizes. This mostly applies to suburban subdivisions where like often
Right.
minimum lot sizes maintain like lots that are too big. But I spoke again with someone there and I said, well, we effectively have minimum lot size rules, which is the pattern of like existing lots, like through the severance process. One way in which the province could take this work stream is to like establish maybe like a minimum frontage, and within that frontage, as of right, severance is regardless of the pattern of the street. Don't know if they're going to do that, but it's at least on the
like a
radar.
good example, like where I see this a lot, and I know there are a couple of active severances happening. So maybe it's a non-issue because they're getting approved. But in the sort of like triangle that is between Kipling, Bloor, and Dundas, just north of the Kipling subway station, there are a lot of 50-foot lots in there. Particularly, there's this big hydro corridor, and there's a lot of lots backing onto this corridor, and then there's 50 to 60-foot lots, and you're 250 meters from the subway station with a bunch of bungalows sitting on 50, 60-foot lots. It seems like the type of place where severing those lots into 25, 30-foot lots would be very appropriate, where you could put more sort of small multiplex type infill product in there. But there still seems to be a little bit of uncertainty depending on the context of the neighborhood you're going into.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe another way to put it is like, if you are reinforced, like getting closer to the pattern of the street, you probably have like a pretty good case. And if you're like deviating, then maybe not.
That's what we find. I mean, I only take projects for conveyances where we can prove statistically we're in line with the typical frontage and lot area of a neighborhood. So if you can't do that, there's probably a reason why you're not getting that approved.
Yeah. So once again, if you want to do it, just call Craig.
Well, make sure you have a good opportunity for it.
Do you guys act as the planners on any of your files? Because you know the policy better than most planners, probably.
Yeah, we're everything for design and approvals, including committee of adjustment, like minor variance and conveyance applications.
Okay. We will say, though, just to make the point, we do like our planners, Greg Ewins and Blair.
I love Greg. I love Blair. I love Sean Galbraith. Like, some of them are my close friends. Yeah. And
I should say, too. When I say most of them more planners, like we hire the planners who know the most. Yeah,
of course.
So I think you're up there with these guys, and we're all
those guys know more than me, but I know enough to scrape by.
Yeah, I mean,
but there's an efficiency on smaller projects to just have like an architect / planner 2-in-1 combo, right? So
you've read my brochure.
Yeah, there you
go. Okay, new City of Toronto initiatives. So we could take them in order, but the three we have here are: 1, expedited permits; 2, pre-approved laneway suite, garden suite designs, soon to be multiplexes; and 3, committee of adjustments being faster and less NIMBY. In order, or how do you want to take it?
The first two, I think, are one of those year in review items where, the pre-approved garden suites and laneway suites are like, it's so great we're doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think one has been used yet. I think they're
And just to be clear,
designs.
The city released designs that if you take that design and use it, it's pre-approved.
And that's what they say.
Yeah.
So here's a permit-ready drawing set, essentially. Like, just... send it into us and you get a permit is the theory.
Yeah.
You have to prepare a site plan. You have to show emergency access. You have to show grading. Not anyone can do that. You still have to hire
not be a tree in the way.
Yeah, exactly. You have to hire an arborist.
Yeah.
Like, you still have to hire professionals to get those approvals. So it's great that we had the press conference where we said that was a thing and that people think that's valuable. But they're kind of useless. That's about to be happening with multiplexes.
Okay.
The city had an RFP where they're asking for the same thing, basically permit-ready drawing sets for multiplexes.
Did you respond to that RFP?
I didn't. I had my kids were homesick that entire week, so I didn't have time. But honestly,
it seems like if anybody should be doing pre-approved city designs for multiplexes, it should be.
If they had sole sourced it from me, I would have done it. But I also wasn't too interested in competing for that work, partly because it would give away my secret recipe.
Yeah.
And also, I just don't believe in it as a resilient solution. Like, every site is different. Totally. And if you don't optimize for your site, you're leaving dollars on the table.
We've been critical of the CMHC design catalog along similar lines. And I think, what it does is, rather than address slow permitting, it pre-approves permitting. It speeds up permitting for like only this specific drawing.
Yeah.
Let's just speed up permitting, right?
Totally.
Like, there's so many things we can do to speed up permitting.
And the problem is not design, it's zoning.
Absolutely.
Like, the building code is not the problem. The architects and engineers and surveyors are not the problem. The problem is zoning.
Yeah.
I will say, though, like, if you sort of think about policies in like one of three categories, like helpful policies, harmful policies, and like neutral. These are probably in that neutral bucket.
Definitely.
Where, like, it indicates that there's at least an acceptance that there's a problem in housing. they threw a dart at the board. Maybe it's the wrong dart. Maybe it didn't hit the board.
Yeah.
But it shows that they're trying to do something, right?
And where it's maybe even a bit better than that. I think where it's a bit worse than that is just like an opportunity cost. You can only do so many things. Where it's a bit better than that is it makes very clear to the city what the design constraints are of their own policies, right? Sometimes you need someone to actually draw a second floor garden suite with slopes on all four sides to realize,
I can't put a bedroom.
I can't stand up here. And then like that triggers like, oh, okay. So these developers who are flagging this for me, they actually had a point, and maybe that leads to like, So that's like the optimistic case, I think.
And I think that's a good assessment.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the supposed expedited permit processes that have been put in place. Supposedly, if I submit a laneway or garden suite building permit application with a form signed by an engineer, they give me a permit in 3 days, is the claim. Hasn't happened to me once, and I've been trying.
Signed by what kind of engineer?
I like structural, mechanical,
right?
Which, like, why isn't the architect signing it?
Yeah,
and why don't staff know they have to give this to me in 3 days? Like, it was a press conference Olivia Chow had. That's
so is this only for garden suite? This is great.
But this is just for laneway garden suites. The expedited timeline, but it's totally fake.
But it does not exist. Does it speed up at all, or not even?
Exact same thing.
Okay, so it's totally
the same form. I don't even know how you identify to staff. I want the 3-day review.
Yeah.
So that's been crazy. There is
that could be really good. Like that directionally, like this is basically delegating authority to licensed professionals who are liable for any mistakes. Like it sounds actually good if they actually did it.
I know. I want to be able to print my own building permits.
Yeah, totally.
I've actually I was harping on staff in the Minister of Housing's office recently about how I want private sector alternatives for zoning review and permit issuance. I think you can keep going to the city, let them do their thing, but I want to create a business where I will review your application based on a municipality's zoning bylaws and the OBC, and I'll issue your permit, and I'll be responsible for your inspections. And I'll probably charge more, but I'll do it about 100 times faster than any municipality.
What was the response to this? I love this stuff.
Well, it's interesting ideas. Like implementing that would be
not resource intensive. I think Brendan Whitson said this is how they do it in Washington.
They do it in Australia. Like, well, it's not unheard.
They don't. My understanding is, and BC is a bit of this. They don't fully issue the permit or complete the zoning, but they allow. Like, let's say for a zoning bylaw amendment, you have your checklist of materials. Rather than having the city review it, you could have a professional review it and sign off on it, and then the city doesn't have to review it. But then, like, you take all those sign-offs together, they still actually issue you the permit. Yeah, interesting. But anyway, any step in that direction, I mean, we know Brad's a very regular listener, so he should be taking this for his mayoral platform. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Go back to C of A. That's less of a policy change, but it's more of a resource change. We've seen like way more hearing dates, more staff. Like I used to throw in committee applications
just to get in queue.
Yeah. I would just write my own zoning waiver because I knew it would take 4 to 5 months to get a hearing. Now I have to have my ducks in a row because when I submit it, the public notice is going out in a couple of weeks. So that change has been great, and we're starting to see efficiencies.
Although another thing that would be cool on the committee side, which has been lobbied for by many people, is delegated authority to staff. So if you're seeking variances that have planning staff's support, you don't go to committee. They basically like approve the variance, which many jurisdictions
reducing the number of files that go to committee.
Which many jurisdictions have. Because it's not obvious that a committee member is more of a licensed professional.
It sort of like requires delineating what is an actual minor variance versus something more contentious.
No, but it's for staff to determine.
I get it. But like staff would say, hey, this is something that we're comfortable approving versus something we want to push off to committee for approval. Right?
Totally. So that's a good one.
By the way, this multiplex pre-approved design that's in the works. The city is all actively, somebody's working on this.
The RFP deadline was last week, I think. Okay. So hopefully sometime next year.
The other thing I really don't like about this is it sort of creates this like pattern of, I mean, not that anybody's going to build these things, but even the theory of it is like, you just create no character. You're in theory just going to build a whole bunch of like replicated building designs.
If it was a system people actually use, that would be a threat.
No one's going to use it. Low risk. No shade to LGA or their designs, but like I'll be very shocked when I come across one of their like CMHC design catalog buildings. And it's not even nothing against the design. It's just to your point, you want to optimize for your specific submarket, your lot, the conditions, the everything, because squeezing out that much more efficiency is more than worth the architect fees. Those aren't like the major costs on these projects.
Yeah, I mean, I hope more governments undertake those kinds of programs.
Yeah.
Because to your point, it teaches them to
Yeah.
view things from a user's perspective, and they can self-identify the issues and hopefully improve their processes.
Right.
Yeah, totally. Okay, maybe let's wrap up. Kind of like concluding thoughts on this year in review.
Well, I mean, the big one is that the changes have been so bountiful that staff don't even know what's going on. So you really have to look out for yourself. Like,
don't take them at their word. Fact check them.
Call someone like Greg and you guys and me and like other friends in the industry, because knowledge is really what's getting us through these. And there's no one single source of knowledge. It's the community we've been building around missing middle housing for the last few years of our career that is really making these projects move efficiently.
On that note, I don't think I've ever gotten an examiner's notice that was correct the first time. So it's very important to have a professional or someone who knows what they're doing, like reading it. Don't just accept it as fact. Yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's making a difference. Like when we look back on this year, all these changes are great.
Yeah.
Like I love complaining about all the difficulties we have in our job, but this year has really been a landmark year in my career.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about how back when secondary suites became a thing, what a win that was.
Yeah.
If we could look forward to ourselves today and see these changes, like it is.
How dare we complain?
Well, I remember the OPA 420 days. So when Jen Keesmat was chief planner, my memory of, was it 420 or 320? It was one of those. But basically, it was the idea that like even if you had a school in the middle of a neighborhood that under pre OPA 420 could be a little bit out of pattern with the neighborhood if it were redeveloped, they further kind of like lock down the stability and preservation of neighborhood character. Compare that, which was not that long ago, to what we're seeing now, which is like a policy to change neighborhood character explicitly. I totally agree. This is such a more productive direction.
Yeah, and the proof's in the pudding. I mean, we're seeing hundreds of laneway suite and garden suite permits issued every year.
Yeah.
Hundreds of multiplexes. I wouldn't be surprised, because these are still accelerating, if we're getting up to like 1,000 multiplexes like permitted every single year.
Yeah.
Like we're starting to accommodate a growingly significant number of new Torontonians in like infill housing in neighborhoods.
And to Chris's earlier point, I mean, that starts to create a constituency that matters in elections.
Yeah.
That starts to propagate more of these positive developments.
And it creates, I think, like change begets more change.
Yeah.
I think like the first multiplex in a neighborhood will have a lot of neighborhood resistance. The fifth one, it's like, this is how cities grow.
Yeah.
And it just becomes like normal to see change.
Yeah, I mean, often a neighbor that opposed my last multiplex will call me because they're doing one. So,
of course,
opinions.
Yeah, you should be handing out brochures at the committee of adjustment hearing for all the opponents.
Are there any changes that you're looking forward to next year, or anything that you would like to see next year, or how are you thinking about next year?
I mean, next year is about staying adaptive.
Yeah,
like. There's going to be big changes coming to CMHC's MLI Select program, specifically to the energy efficiency requirements.
Yeah.
Like that has been the key to unlocking multiplex projects. Like they would not exist without that financing solution.
Yeah.
So being compliant with that and being compliant with HST exemptions, like those seem to be the things that have become what you have to be really sharp on as a developer. Like I can help you through zoning and building permit and all these things that I'll keep working on.
Yeah.
But there are things that fall into your guys' bailiwick that are beyond the scope of most current professionals that you guys have to build an industry around.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a level of sophistication that everybody's having to learn how to.
And specifically, just to make it explicit for the audience, for the MLI Select energy efficiency points, they're now increasing the threshold to, I think, 70% of the National Building Code energy efficiency requirement.
And they're basing it on a more current baseline building.
Correct. And that will kick in September of 2026. Yeah. So that's like a major change to how you think about your envelope, your R values, and so on, if you want to continue to get those points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's been an incredible year. You know, like we can do fairly substantial small projects with no site plan control, no development charges. You know, we can use severances to multiply those rights onto 14 and 21 unit developments. we're seeing less NIMBYism, or at least fewer people are listening to NIMBYs
Sure.
than they were
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
We're seeing more openness from staff and
Yeah.
leaders in our city as they become more familiar and comfortable with these policies. It's been a good year. I think 2025 was a great year for housing in Toronto. And
Yeah.
I think it's a sign of what's going to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to sort of fast forward 5-10 years and picture some of these neighborhoods where you're putting the first shovels in the ground today. And to Chris's point, when there's 5 on that same street, on that same laneway, I think it's going to be a really different city in the near future.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll end on that hopeful note. I totally agree with everything you said. And I appreciate you joining the show to share your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Happy New Year, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, by the way, we
Happy
never
New Year.
say this, so I'll say it, especially because on YouTube, we don't have a lot of subscribers yet, but it's only our second video episode. So please subscribe, like, share, pass this along to
Hit the
your
bell, ding. Yeah.
missing middle community friends, because we'll try to do as many more of these helpful and informative episodes as we can.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks, guys.